Hi everyone! Alright, let's try this again. For those of you who were here last week, you know that I ran into some technical problems. I wasn't able to stream. It was super glitchy, super buggy, but everything seems to be working well this week. I'm looking at my stream health and it says that it's excellent. So hopefully it stays that way. I don't know what happened last week. I think my computer was just like giving up on me or something. And yeah, that's it. So this week, I am actually giving you all a preview of one of our Hour of Code submissions for this year. It's not a finished tutorial, so we're kind of going to be like going through this experiment together. Hi, Chamchi. So definitely let me know in the chat if you're enjoying it, if there's anything that's confusing. I would say it's probably like a harder project, especially as far as our Hour of Code projects go. So I definitely, let me turn that Slack off, that Slack notification off. Yeah, I'm definitely curious what you think. Looks like there's only one person here right now, but that's fine. Cool, let's go ahead and get started. So go ahead and open the sandbox app. That's where we're going to be coding today. And yeah, like I said, so the final project, let me just open the final project so you can see it, so you know what we're making. So it's basically going to be this climate clock. So to read, the climate clock project was created by the Human Impact Lab of Concordia University. And it answers the question, given the current rate of emissions and level of human-induced warming, and assuming emissions trend over the past 5 years continues into the future, how long will it be before the remaining allowable emissions for 1.5 degrees centigrade are used up? So that's a lot, but that's what we're going to be making today. And we're going to be using the JavaScript date object, which is going to be really fun. So there's actually a bunch of sort of like blocks in here that we don't have access to yet, because like I said, this isn't like a live tutorial. But that's totally fine. I'm just gonna like paste them in to the chat. So instead of like dragging a block in, you can just copy and paste something from the chat. And we're in beta here. It's all good. So to start, go ahead and select a background. When this tutorial goes live, I really want to have a bunch of backgrounds, ones that are sort of nature-y, ones that are sort of like maybe show like a factory or something. But for now, we have the basics that are in here. I kind of like the lava lamp. I feel like if we're doing like a clock, like a climate clock, the lava lamp to me feels like sand trickling down, right? Like a, what is that called? Like an hourglass. I think the lava lamp is going to be my hourglass and sort of the background for my clock. So go ahead and choose yours. It can be anything. As always, definitely follow the tutorial and sort of get the same logic that I'm using, but your clock can look however you want it to. So let's see what's the next step. Okay, cool. So next in this imaginary tutorial, a date block will appear. And it'll essentially look like this. So it'll look like var my_date equals new date, and then parentheses, and then a quotation mark. So I'm going to say I posted it in the chat. Just copy and paste it in. Basically what's happening here is that we're creating a variable, and it's just called my date. The same way we have my text, the same way we have my graphic. We have my date. But this looks like a little bit different than what we're used to, right? Usually we just call, for example, like text. Here we have this weird new word basically, this means that we're calling a JavaScript object directly. So date is a built-in JavaScript object. It lets us use the current date. So if I'm like, what time is it? And JavaScript says 3:06, and then I say, what time is it? JavaScript will say 3:06 in 1 second, and it does that automatically. It's dynamic. So if I have like a blog or something, and I always want the newest date to be visible to whoever visits my blog or my website, if like VidCode decided that we like wanted a constant date on like our top nav bar, we could use this date object for that, because it'll always give me the current date. So how is that helpful? Well, we can go in and visualize it, right? We can actually look at this date. So we can do that by going in and dragging in the text object. So if you're in the sandbox, just go ahead and scroll down here on the left and drag in text. I don't like when my variables are stacked like this. I'm just going to add a space between them. And here we have var myText1 equals my text function, and then hello. I don't want it to say hello. I want it to say my date. So I am going to delete this and not in parentheses because this is a variable and not a string. I'm going to write my_date. So now your code should look like this as well. So let's go ahead and just press this refresh button. And you can see here on the right what I was talking about, right? Like every time I press this refresh button, the milliseconds on the right update, which is awesome. So we're not going to do anything to this yet. If you do want to edit the X position, Y position, color, and you remember how to do that, go ahead. I'm going to get to that at the end. I want to do all the logic stuff first. So the first thing I'm going to actually do here is change my_text1 to be a variable name that's more representative of what this is. So I'm just going to call it clock. And that way it's really easy for me to read my code, for any other programmers who come in to read my code and know what's going on. Okay, awesome. So the other thing we can store is dates into the future. So I'm just going to put it up on the top as a comment. If you remember, comments are // and they're code that the computer ignores. They're just for humans. So currently, let me get it really quick. I'm like half looking at the tutorial while I do this, so sorry if I'm pausing a bit. But the last day is, where is it? Okay, I found it. November 25th, 2032 is the day where we will irreversibly reach 1.5 degrees centigrade increase. So I'm just going to add that to the top here as a comment. Here it is in the chat if you want it on your end as well. So then basically I want to store that in a different date object. So if I don't pass in anything into these parentheses, nothing appears. And that's a little bit similar to some things on VidCode. Like for example, if I drag in, I don't know, like grid, by default, there's no number in here. I could pass in a number. I could pass in 5, and that's how big the grid size is, 50, 500, so just be like 1. But it doesn't mean anything, right? By default, it's like whatever size this is. Same with, let's say, rectangle. So rectangle, if I don't pass in anything, I do need to pass in a color because I can't see anything. Let me change the color of this really quick so we can see it. Exposure 500. All right, let me just invert this. Bam. Okay, now my rectangle is visible. So I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100% sure, if I delete this, there will be defaults. Okay, yeah, so nothing's passed in here. Normally it would be like the X position, Y position, and then like width, and then height. And that's how I would set that. I can always click on this to actually check. The last one's color. Awesome, okay. If there's nothing in it, it has defaults. So all that's to say, if I call this new date function without putting anything in it, the default is the current time. It's this dynamic, self-updating current time. Once again, I push refresh and I'll see it update. I actually got a number update that time, which is kind of cool. So I can also use future dates, and I use them by passing them into these parentheses. And those are going to be more specific. They're not going to update. They're going to be static. And that's because they're only one date, right? They're not like what is right now. They're just this date in the future that I'm setting. So let's do that. So the date function, what gets passed in is going to be the year, the month, the day, the hour, the minute, and the second. So it's a lot. I don't need to do all of it. So here I'm just going to say var last day instead of my date, and I'm going to say new date. Same as before. So let me pass that or share that with you all. That's in the chat. You can go ahead and copy and paste it as well. So then let's see here. So then here I want to pass in the year. So if I look up here, it's 2032. The day, which is the 25th. No, next is the month. Okay. So November, which normally when we think about dates is the 11th month, right? It's January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, which is the 11th. However, as you remember from various array lessons we've had, programmers often start counting at 0. And that's true for months as well. So in this case, instead of having 11 stand for November, we just have 10. Does that make sense? So January would be 0, February would be 1, March would be 2, April would be 3, so it's just 1 less than whatever we'd have. So what would December be? Can you let me know in the comments or in the chat? What number would December be if I wanted to pass it in? Maybe I'll add that as a quiz on the actual one too. Maybe I will. So since January is 0, December would be 11. Okay, cool. So then if that's the case, 10 is November, and then the days actually don't start at 0. I don't know why. The days start at 1, which I find a little bit confusing. I think I would prefer if it was consistent. But that is totally fine. JavaScript was made by people who are not me, who made their own decisions about their built-in objects. So now that I have this date here, and let me just post it in so you guys can just take it. I know this is a bit hard without the box. So we have the year, the month, the day. And so if I take my text object and display last day instead of my date, it's going to show it to me here. So here I have Thursday, November 25th, 2032, 00000000. The reason it says 00000000 is because I didn't specify a time. So by default, the time is just a bunch of zeros. So I can pass in a time. Unlike days, but like months, time starts at 0 as well. So hours are between 0 and 23, minutes are between 0 and 59, seconds are between 0 and 59. So definitely a little bit confusing. Like I said, I don't know why days start at 1 and not 0. But let's just choose a time. I don't think we have the exact time that we reach 1.5 degrees increase. So we can just make up a time here. So put in anything, it doesn't have to match mine. I'm gonna say like 1 p.m. So 1 p.m. would be 12 because we're minusing by 1. Yeah, so 12. Oh, interesting. 13. I guess I was wrong. Wait, how does I put in 25? Okay, maybe I was wrong. Okay, so no, it looks like the hours are the hours. Possibly I had a wrong source for that. And then I'll put it at like 30 minutes. And then like 45 seconds. So like I said, put this as whatever. I guess it was right, because if you're counting, you would count from, like if I'm keeping track of the time, it would be 0. Like 1 o'clock is 100. So no, that makes sense to me. That actually isn't like a programming counting thing. So that's kind of cool too, if you see this. So if instead of 0 here, I put in like 60, you can't have 60 minutes, right? That's an hour. So it actually just does the math for me and updates my 13 to 14. That's kind of cool. Yep, for whoever just asked for my code, 100%. So that's all the code from like here down. The code on the top, just choose any video background. And then this sort of date on the top is just for me, or you, for all of us. It's just like the last day. So for those of you who came in late, we're making a countdown clock from today to the last day that we reach 1.5 increase for global warming. And we're using the JavaScript date object and learning about date and time in native JavaScript objects. And this is actually for our hour of code tutorial. So I'm like a bit flustered trying to get it live for the submission date tomorrow. And you're all getting kind of a really cool preview. Okay, so next, let's start using something called methods. So we use functions literally all the time. Like this text is a function. If I add this kaleidoscope, it's like a function making this cool star. I add tint, that's a function. It's a function to change the color. And then these are different parameters that I'm passing in. So like 90, it's going to have more of an effect than 20. Don't do this. This is just me explaining that we use functions all the time. You're all familiar with functions. Methods are similar. They're just used on specific objects. So the date object has functions inside it that we can use, and those are called methods. They're basically two names for the same thing. Don't worry about it. If someone ever says or tells you that you're going to be using a method, in your head you can be like, okay, this is a function, I know what this is. So one method that we have access to is getDay. So for example, in here in my text, I can say getDay, and I just do that using dot notation. So if I call my date object and say dot get day with these parentheses, it's going to return the day of the week. Like everything else, it starts at 0. So Sunday is 0, and then Saturday would be 6. So our current last day, November 25th, 2032, is going to be 0 is Sunday, 1 is Monday, 2 is Tuesday, 3 is Wednesday, 4, which I have 5 fingers up because it started at 0, is Thursday. So that makes sense. Let me check this. Let me make sure that this is working. So instead of last day here, I'm going to use the variable I created here, my date. Okay, and it gives me 2. So is that right? What's today? Today is Tuesday. So Sunday is 0, Monday is 1, Tuesday is 2. So that makes sense. It looks right to me. Great. So that's not like super helpful, right? Like now we know the day of the week, but like that doesn't help us with our clock. So what does help us with our clock? Well, this method called getTime is going to help us with our clock, and that is getTime spelled like that. I just put it in the chat, and that is going to give us the number of milliseconds that have passed since January 1st, 1970. And that number is totally random. Like, why would we want this number? But we can use it to compare dates. So right now we just have 2 dates in a format that's really easy for people to read, but I can't do math on them, right? I can't subtract some future date from this date. Like, what would that look like? So I need to break it into milliseconds, subtract one from the other, and then repurpose it into a clock that people can read. So it sounds like a lot, but I'm going to walk us through it. So first, let me prove to you that getTime does in fact give us the number of milliseconds from, what was it, January 1st, 1970? Crazy. So here I have a crazy string of seconds, milliseconds. If I press refresh, it keeps updating, probably at the rate that I would expect milliseconds to update. Remember, there's 1,000 milliseconds in a second. Great. However, right, if I do last day, it's not going to update because that's a static date. So those milliseconds will always be the same. If I update the time, for example, like if I go in here and say, all right, do it at 2 p.m. instead, or like 46, then it'll update. Let me put this at like, no, I think we can't pass in decimal seconds. Okay. Yeah, see, so I'm going to update the minutes and like watch it, it'll update. There you go. But that's only because I'm manually updating the last day, like the time of it, right? It's totally static if I refresh the page versus my date updates on its own because it's dynamic. Okay, awesome. So basically a really simple version of this clock is for me to just, so let me actually go in here and take getTime away from my text object and instead put it here. So I'm going to add at the end of this date object, I'm going to add dot getTime. Same thing here, I'm going to add dot getTime. So now if I check, this should just give me the milliseconds. And it does, which is awesome. So for like a really simple countdown clock, if I just wanted to count down in milliseconds, I could say last day minus my date. And there we go. Hooray, simple countdown clock. I mean, not hooray, it's hard to say hooray about this kind of thing. If I wanted to make sure that it was right, like maybe, oh, am I doing it in the right order? I could, but if I do this, it should be negative. So I can tell, all right, that's the wrong order. I'm subtracting the current date from the future. So this is going to be correct. And great. So now I have like this version 1 of a countdown clock. Let me go ahead and update them. So then the next thing I want to do is just save that as a variable. So I'm going to go in here and say, I'm going to call it var time left. And I'm going to say equals just last day minus my date. Those are saved in milliseconds now, so I don't have to worry about it. Just to show you what that would be, because like why we had to subtract or turn it into milliseconds. Like what happens if I get rid of this get time here? Oh, it still does it. Interesting. It looks like I am lagging again. I don't know why. Why does that keep happening? It looks fine on my end. All right, well, I'm just going to keep going and hopefully this starts working again. I actually think we might not have to. That's interesting. But it just does it for you. And if I do get time, it's the same. Okay, cool. So JavaScript, the data object's actually pretty smart. It will, by default, change to get time and let you delete one from the other, which is pretty cool. We're still going to use get time, but that's awesome that it just does it for you. That's amazing. Yeah, do you want to share your code? We can see some, we can debug. My favorite part is debugging. While we're waiting for Ria to share their code, I am actually going to start sharing some. Okay, so this is a bunch of code, and this is all going to be in a block. But for now, I'm just going to share it in the chat and just copy and paste it in. Oh, it's so much code. I'm so sorry. Oh, cool. Let's do this first, just because I don't even want to look at that right now. All right, let me go ahead and fix this YouTube formatting. Okay, cool. So if I'm looking at this, Ria, I can hover over the line that it's telling me is wrong. And I can really easily see that it has an issue with this. It's telling me time left is not defined. And that is because we don't have, you're not setting a variable called time left. So if you look at mine on line 21, I set this variable time left, and then I just set it equal to last day minus my date, and then it'll work. So whenever you see something like something's not defined, like for example, if I like get rid of this, I'll get the error on this one. Last day is not defined because I don't create the variable anywhere. So if you add just this line of code above, like above clock, it'll work. Thanks for submitting that. Okay, so let me start writing these lines of code. I'm going to write them in like one comment at a time, just because it is a lot. So go ahead and I'll say like starting now. Copy and paste the lines of code in one at a time. And do it above clock, but under time left. So on mine, it would be line 16 that I'm going to start pasting this into. Do that, wherever that is in your code. So here's the first one. Good God. Here's the second one. Here's the third one. Here's the fourth one. Okay. What was the last one I said? Okay, bar hour. This is the other one. This is the day. And then this is the hour. Please paste them in order. Thank you. Oh boy. Okay, I'll give everyone a second to do that. And then I will go ahead and also copy and paste them all in. I'll give everyone, like a minute to do that, and then I'll start talking about it. Oh no, and I gave you guys an error. Oh my God. What a nightmare. Okay, there were some errors. This is the most recent one. So basically, I posted in the newest one. Your code should look like mine. Oh no, Chomchi, I'm sorry. Let me see if I can find your project. Yeah, it doesn't autosave, unfortunately. No, I don't see it. Well, it's okay. Here, let me publish my project so you can just remix it and start from where I am. And this is for anyone following right now, actually. If you're like feeling lost, if you like didn't copy and paste everything incorrectly, you can go ahead and go to the link I just posted and just like remix it. I don't know why it's not loading. And then you can start from there. There it is. Okay, awesome. No problem. Yeah, I think it might not just be you. I think other people might be lost too, just because I said this is like one of our harder tutorials for Hour of Code. So basically, this is a lot of code. What's going on here is that we are dividing milliseconds up to be these different like time segments, if that makes sense. So since there are 1,000 milliseconds in a second, if I have 1,000 milliseconds, I have 1 second, right? So 1,000 divided by 1,000 is 1. And then basically what I want to do is, yeah, so that's how I would get the seconds. Minutes is the same. I would take the number of seconds, divide it by 60. Hours is the same. I would take the number of minutes and divide it by 60. Days, since there are 24 hours in a day, take the hours and divide them by 24. And it makes sense, right? Like, think about it. So move the console up and do some math. So if I know that I have 48 hours, don't actually do this code right now. I'm just gonna like show you in the console. Let me make sure the console is showing up. Yeah, it is. So I have 48 hours. How many days is that? Well, as a person, I can do the math really quick and say like 24 times 2, it's 2 days. But the computer isn't going to be that smart. It's not going to do mental math. The computer doesn't have mental math. It only has regular math. So if I know there are 24 hours in a day, I can take 48 divided by 24, and then 2. It's 2 days. So that's exactly what this line of code, line 23, is doing. It's taking all of the hours, dividing it by 24, and getting the number of days left. So using that logic, what would I do to get the year? So I'm going to say var year, and then I'm going to say equals, and I'll just show you. I mean, does anyone have like a guess? I want to see if anyone can get it. What would I put there? Can anyone like even tell me part of the code maybe? What do you guys think? What number, for example, would I divide by to get the number of years? And what would I, like what number would I divide? What variable would I divide from? I know one of you has the answer. So I gave you the first part. It's var year equals, but then one of these days, or like one of these variables, I want to use to actually do the math on, right? So what I want to do, hours or minutes or seconds or days. What's going to be the easiest thing to divide up and get the year from? So basically, it's going to want to be days, right? Because there's 365 days in a year. So here I'm going to say year equals day, or whoops, math.floor, because I want it to round down. And then day divided by 365. There we go. So nothing's updated yet, even though I did that correctly, I think. So then the next thing I would do is just make it visible, right? So if I'm combining things in JavaScript, I use a plus sign. So I want the format to be essentially like X years, X days, X hours, X minutes, X seconds. So I'm just going to say year plus Y plus space there plus day plus D plus hour plus H plus minute plus M plus second plus S. And I think that should work. It's not, which makes me think I missed a plus sign. Yep. Okay. There we go. So now it's in a format that, to me, looks a lot better. I actually think instead of having like hours and months sort of separate like that, I'm going to add a colon instead, so it looks more like a clock. Okay, so then really the last thing to do here is just to update it so like I'm no longer pressing this refresh button, because that's not a very good clock, right? Like a regular clock, I'm not constantly like hard refreshing. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and drag in the repeat block here. And then let's go ahead and bring this back. I'm basically just going to copy a lot of this and just move it into the repeat block. all of it, basically, even though I wouldn't have to do all of it. Let me see what the example one has. Because new date has to constantly be in the repeat blocks. It has to keep updating. Yeah, okay. So let's go ahead and move. I'm going to keep last day out of the repeat block just because it doesn't have to be there. And then everything else, I'm literally going to copy every single thing and move it into this repeat function. And let's go ahead and tab it over just so my code's a bit more organized. Oh, and then, so I'm getting this effect because clock is like overwriting. So I'm actually going to move like var clock out here and then say clock.message equals that's not working. So I think I'm going to have to make a variable called like clock output. Oh, duh. Because I didn't set this to a text function. That'll do it. Okay, awesome. So yeah, basically that's it. You can go ahead and like customize it with things like clock.color. You could like make it a different color if you wanted to. You can make it bigger. Basically anything you wanted. You could like change the X position. Change the Y position. And then in this case, I'm actually going to add some filters on the background, just so that my clock stands out a bit more. Remember, your code is run in order. So if you add things like the vignette filter and like put it before your text, it'll only show up on your video and make it a bit easier for it to show up. Oh, it ends in 1 minute. So this is done. Good job, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and submit this. Go ahead and submit your projects. I'll pull some of them up. And yeah, sorry, yeah, I'm like the worst at time management, so I never tell anyone when it ends, but it's always 45 minutes. Yeah, I'm seeing if anyone submitted a clock. Cool. Well, thank you all for coming. This was super fun. I'm glad that I had the opportunity to go through the Hour of Code project with everyone. And I'll see everyone next week. Bye, guys.